I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Autumn and I catch up, talk about our journeys over this week. And then we've got a very, very important conversation. We sat down with Dr. Villavicencio, Skye Perryman, and Reverend Deneen Robinson talking about the recent released draft opinion that might overturn Roe v. Wade in this country. There's a lot of concern that women's reproductive health is at stake in many of the states in the United States. So it is a very important conversation that you are not going to want to miss. So stay tuned.
Arms folded, feet pacing the floor. It's written all over your face. The body doesn't hide our true feelings. It disregards promises made to keep the peace or just keep it to ourselves. I'm Reverend Starlette Thomas, host of the Raceless Gospel podcast from Good Faith Media. We're giving our listeners a hand when discerning body language. That's our focus in season 3. The church is called the body of Christ, so what does our body language say about perennial and pressing hot-button issues? What's costing us an arm and a leg? Who do we give the cold shoulder and keep at arm's length? When have we put our foot in our mouth or turned a blind eye? Why are we still sitting on our hands? Where do we toe the line? And why is the kingdom that is coming not on the tip of our tongues? In season 3 of the Raceless Gospel podcast, we'll address these questions in 8 episodes, and I hope you'll be all ears. The Raceless Gospel podcast is looking at body language. I'm your podcast pastor, Reverend Starlette Thomas. Episode 1 drops on May 5th. Learn more at goodfaithmedia.org.
Autumn, we are on the road. I am in Denver, Colorado at this wonderful event. Do you want to know what it's called? You want to know what it's called, right?
I want you to tell everyone what it's called. Yep, sure do.
It's called the Festival of Homiletics.
Are you feeling festive, Mitch? That's my question.
It sounds almost like the Renaissance fair, doesn't it? I mean,
it really does. I keep telling you, you're going to get a Jesus-shaped funnel cake.
I show up here in Denver and I'm expecting to see, a bunch of clergy in their robes and regalia walking down the streets. But no, they're in Vans and cutoffs and T-shirts.
Good, as they should be. I'm glad they're comfortable, enjoying their, I always get it mixed up, homiletics or hermeneutics?
Well, those are two legitimate words. But
I know they are. I paid for a seminary degree, and that's about as much as I know.
That's right. But no, it's been a great conference so far. I'm right in the middle of it. Heard a lot of great preachers. I felt so, I had so much sympathy for our preachers and pastors and ministers throughout this pandemic. We've talked about it on this pod before, not only the pandemic, but the racial justice issues, the LGBTQ equality issues, trans issues, presidential election, bipartisan or partisan politics. I mean, our pastors have been through the ringer the last year, and to step behind that sacred desk each and every week, I just continue to applaud them and thank them for what they do for the church at large. It's just yeoman's work, and I really appreciate it. And sitting here listening to preachers preach, some of the best preachers across the country, is very inspirational. And you can see it on the preacher's face who are sitting out in the audience. They are being fed. And I think this is exactly what this week needs for them, needs to bring for them, and that is to be fed by the word of God and the words of these wonderful preachers. It's really a good event. Anybody who's not able to come, encourage you to try to start planning for next year's festival. It's either in person or online, so you can attend either way. But it's a good time. I'm in Denver, and where are you going?
Well, if I can ever get my suitcase packed, we've been in this pod loft all day, and I'm trying to pack for a 12-day trip and get 4 kids ready to be away from us for 12 days. But I'm supposed to be, if plans go the right way, I should be in Hawaii by the time this drops.
Wow. And it's not just for vacation and fun, even though there's going to be a lot of fun had.
There
You're going.
is. Yes, it's an experience with Good Faith Media. So some of our Good Faith followers from across the different, arenas that we operate in are joining us, and we're taking an astronomer along with us as a guest, and he's going to take us to a place where there is no light pollution and show us the stars, and I'm very excited.
Well, I'm very excited. Now, you did use a phrase that has me a little worried. You said a 12-day trip. I remember a little song and show about a 12-day tour that a group of castaways went on.
It was a 3-hour tour.
It was a 3-hour tour.
Falling down on your Nick at Night, Mitch. Actually, it was supposed to be a 3-hour tour, and it turned into being like 12 seasons or something. I don't know. Gilligan kept messing it up. But I was looking, I'm like, that's like half a month. Like, I'm going to be away from my children for half a month. So this going on in my bones that's normal, right? Yeah, it's
that's
good.
Right. Well, Doc will be across town if they need some doc time. I'll go check on them. So.
Perfect. That sounds good. Their grandparents are coming. They're going to be in fine hands. It's just those last few weeks of May where, every day, like I'm looking at a pirate costume that I've curated over here. Like we've got to have water balloons. I mean, every day in May is something, and we have 4 kids. So it's just bananas. So you might, instead of praying for me, you might want to pray for the grandparents stepping in here.
Well, absolutely. Well, I hope you and the team have a great time in Hawaii. Anybody who wants to participate on one of our experiences, you can find out more about those experiences at goodfaithmedia.org. We've got another one coming up this summer to the Pacific Northwest, another one scheduled this fall to Amish country in Pennsylvania, as we will interact with some of the Amish communities there. So lots of great things going on
and Mitch,
with our experiences.
We also have a writers retreat coming up in October.
That's right.
And I'm especially excited about this because I used to be a creative writing teacher. That was my job. We were like lava lamps and bean bags in the floor, and my students didn't have to wear shoes. And I mean, I like to live what I call a writerly life, and I am so excited to get to spend some time with some amazing writers from a lot of from songwriters to novel writers. Some of our podcast guests that you might know, Ann Nelson's going to be joining us, and even if you haven't been published before, it's not too late. It's just a chance to get together in some beautiful fall foliage in the Georgia mountains, and just write together. And Mitch and I will be there. So if you like this podcast, you'd probably like to come to the workshop.
Absolutely, we would love to have you. So that's a great reminder. The Writers Retreat in North Georgia. It's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be very inspirational. We get to meet with some incredible writers and singer-songwriters and novelists as well. So thanks for mentioning that. Well, Autumn, big news a couple of weeks ago. We talked about on this pod before. Politico released a leaked draft of a Supreme Court opinion that looks as though they're going to be overturning Roe v. Wade. You and I sat down with 3 very important people this week. Dr. Jen Villavicencio, who's an OBGYN, Skye Perryman, who is the executive director or president and CEO of Democracy Forward, and Reverend Deneen Robinson. All 3 of these women are incredible professionals, extremely knowledgeable, and very passionate about women's reproductive health from a faith perspective. So it is an interview that our listeners are going to listen to. Lots of great knowledge in there. So stay tuned, and Autumn and I will be back soon.
Marvel at Pacific Coast Wells. Wonder in rainforests. Explore wild coastlands and towering cliffs. Join Good Faith Media for a unique and immersive experience in the Pacific Northwest and Olympic National Park. Enjoy engaging conversation with your small group of adventurers led by our team, which includes a journalist, historian, and theologian. Join us July the 23rd through 30th. Learn more at faithexperiences.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got three very special guests with us talking about one of the most important issues that the country is facing these days. Dr. Jen Villavicencio has completed her Bachelor's of Science in Neuroscience at the University of Michigan and went on to receive her medical degree as a member of the charter class at the University of Central Florida College of Medicine. She completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at Brown University Women and Infants Hospital, where she developed a passion for family planning. Skye Perryman is a lawyer, advocate, and leader with a track record of taking on and winning critical fights that advance democratic values, stop abuses of power, and improve the well-being of people and communities. She is named president and CEO of Democracy Forward Foundation in June 2021, returning to the organization where she was once founding litigation team. She most recently served as a chief legal counsel officer and general counsel of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Reverend Deneen Robinson is with the National Birth Equity Collaborative. The NBEC is committed to the assurance of the conditions of optimal births for all people, with a willingness to address racial and social inequities in a sustained effort. She serves populations in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So, Reverend, Counselor, and Doctor, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, as you know, big news last week, or not last week, but a few weeks ago, when Politico announced or published a leak of a draft opinion from the Supreme Court. So, Skye, let's begin with you. Since that leak opinion from the Dobbs v. Jackson Women Health Organization case was published by Politico, lots of discussion has taken place. The leaked draft pointed to the court's willingness to overturn Roe v. Wade. Skye, briefly, can you educate us on the Dobbs case and why the court is even considering overturning Roe?
Well, thanks, Mitch. The leaked opinion is just that. It's a leaked opinion. We don't know what the final opinion will be. But the case in Mississippi is a case that involves a 15-week ban on abortion care in Mississippi. It went up to the Supreme Court. There were a variety of there were arguments made back in December of 2021. I think you all covered some of those there. You heard the United States step in and defend longstanding precedent in this country that there is a right to privacy, and that right to privacy encompasses one's own reproductive freedom. You saw the counsel for the plaintiffs in the case challenging the law also make that argument. And then we saw many institutions, faith-based institutions, medical institutions, public health institutions, racial equity institutions, so many institutions stand up and affirm that in a constitutional democracy, our reproductive freedom should be protected, and that is longstanding what the courts have interpreted with the Constitution. Now, if we take a step back, what I can say is that it is unfortunately not surprising, although it will be tremendously harmful if the court does what it looks like it's poised to do. It is unfortunately not surprising that we're seeing this, because the far right extremists in the United States have been incredibly clear for many years that they don't believe that our Constitution protects fundamental liberties such as a privacy liberty that would allow one to control their own reproductive life. And they have waged a campaign through our courts and in our communities in order to impose that view. That is a view that is held by the minority of the country. We know that overwhelmingly people support basic constitutional liberties, including the ability to control one's reproductive life. And really what we're going to see here with all the restrictions that have been in place for so many years, and of course now looking at this, which is could further cut back on our rights, is a lot of injustice with respect to communities that are already marginalized by systems and structures in our society. And I know that we have some wonderful guests here today that can talk more firsthand about the impacts on those communities. So that's a little bit on the Dobbs case and where it is and how it's sort of positioned in our in our sort of current time.
So, Jen, if Roe is overturned and states are allowed to ban abortions within their state lines, what will that mean for women's health?
Thank you for that question, and thank you for having me on. I'm really honored to be here with these other guests and to be talking about this issue that is really deeply upsetting and concerning to me as a physician and a doctor who provides comprehensive obstetric and gynecologic care, including abortion care. And so, I think the first thing that to think about is, as everybody is really worried about this decision coming down, understandably so, is that Roe has not been protecting people for a really long time. We've seen, for example, in Texas, people have not had access to abortion past around 6 weeks since September of last year, which is in direct conflict with Roe. And so for many communities, this has already been a reality for them. But what we know is going to happen with this sweeping decision is that nearly half the states are going to either severely restrict or outright ban access to essential health care that is abortion. And what we know is that abortion has and always will be a part of the reproductive needs of people who can get pregnant and people who want to parent and for people who want to build families. 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by the time that they're 45. And the majority of people who have abortions are already mothers. So the people that are going to be affected by this are your neighbors, are your friends, are your families. And for some of you who are listening, it might be you who might find yourself in need of abortion. And I think it's also particularly important on this podcast to mention that people of all faith traditions and beliefs also have abortions. And it is not in conflict with their faith. Oftentimes it is done in communion with their faith. And so it's a really, really scary time, not only for doctors, but also for people who are going to need this care. And unfortunately, there is no doubt among the scientific and medical community that people are going to get hurt, and their lives and their communities are going to be severely, severely impacted in a way that doesn't need to happen. This is unscientific, it's senseless, it's ideologic, and it's really a quite terrible shame that this is where we're at as a country.
Because really the reality, Jen, is that even though some states may outlaw abortion, abortion is still going to remain. Unfortunately, in these states that ban abortion or put extreme limits to abortion, it is putting women and mothers' lives in danger, women's lives in danger. And that is terrifying, because where does this type of legislation stop? Because it's not just abortion, it's the totality of women's health and reproductive health. What else is on the line if this were to pass?
So you're completely correct that women's and people who can get pregnant, their lives are completely on the line with this. Not only in that we are going to see people die because of these laws, but also their ability to form their own families and make decisions within the expertise of their lives. People know their families and know their communities and know their situations better than anybody else, certainly better than lawmakers. And so we're going to see people who are having barriers put in between them and their ability to access essential healthcare. We're also going to see other aspects of healthcare impacted, specifically around early pregnancy management with miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy, and complications in the later second trimester are also going to be impacted because physicians are being threatened. Doctors and other healthcare professionals are being threatened with either financial, legal, or even criminal penalties. And so now we have to think about whether or not we're willing to put everything on the line to treat somebody. And that is a really scary prospect to be in when you have someone that is sick in front of you. How sick do they need to be for me to decide that I'm willing to risk it all? That's not something that you want your doctor thinking about when your family member is in front of them. You want them thinking about only the science, the medicine, and what it is that that person in front of them needs. And so it's a real horrible impact that is going to happen. And I'm frankly pretty terrified about what it's going to look like. Not everybody is going to have the means to travel. That's one thing that people keep talking about is traveling. Another thing is people keep talking about medications getting mailed. And while all of those things are possible, we know that that's not going to be possible for everybody. Right. And so we know that people can manage their abortions on their own safely, but not everybody can. And they shouldn't have to. Everybody should have the ability to access a healthcare professional to decide whether or not they want to continue a pregnancy without interference from the government. And that's a value that we all can hold because we know that abortion is affirming not only of life, but also of parenthood in many cases, because people are choosing this in order to make sure that they can continue to parent the families that they have.
And that's such an important point because, where does this type of legislation stop? Even though some states will continue caring for women's reproductive health while other states ban it, there's already talks in many states of putting this type of legislation in place where people would be fined or even face imprisonment if they were to help somebody cross state lines to receive an abortion. So this is horrifying for many, many, many reasons. Now, Deneen, I want to turn to you. You work with women every day in Dallas, and with Texas leading the effort in banning abortion, as a reverend, what does this mean for your clients in North Texas?
So first of all, I want to say I'm really glad to be on this show. My job responsibility is to do religion policy strategy. So that question for me has many meanings. Part of what I do in Texas is I serve as an abortion chaplain. So I have had the opportunity to travel with women from Texas to New Mexico on an airplane who were getting abortion access. I also have had the opportunity to work with families who were trying to make the decision on what to do because they've had a fetal anomaly. And unfortunately, these laws don't just impact people who are not able to care for children or don't want children at this time. These laws also affect people who want the child that they're carrying. And for those folk, this is a harrowing experience because they've had to carry fetuses for longer than they should because they've been trying to find some way to access the care that they need. And like the two individuals before me, they have been risking their health, risking becoming septic because when a fetus is inside you and it's not supposed to be anymore, your body's actively rejecting it. It can also harm the carrier. And the other thing for me is to look at how people are using Christianity and the Bible in such a negative way, in such an adverse way, to make decisions around people's lives. Because the text does not say that that birthing people cannot have an abortion. There's nothing in the text that says that. There are things in the text that say men should not be irresponsible with their seed and that they are unclean if they spill their seeds in negative ways without it being assigned to procreation. But we don't talk about that. And so I think it's important that we use this opportunity to not only change the narrative, but make sure people understand that essentially people are using dogma to position women and other birthing people in ways that will essentially take away their rights to exist and move around in the world. One of the things that I say is that this is another form of slavery, because the people that are going to be impacted are poor folk, people who don't have access to the resources to get to other states, to get abortions, people who don't even know that there are resources that exist that can help them pay for the procedures that they want or need. And so they result in having to add to their families when they can't afford the children that they already have.
Deneen, I'm so glad you brought that up because a couple of weeks ago, we had Rabbi Rachel Aiken from New York on the show, and Rachel Ain. Rabbi Ain spoke eloquently in a sermon last year after the Texas law was passed about a Jewish theological understanding and advocacy for women's reproductive health. And she outlined text in the Old Testament, the Torah, where it specifically gives instructions on how women need to make certain that they are the important commodity to Yahweh and to the community, and their lives must be saved, and how to have an abortion. It's spelled out right there. So, people often ask me, Reverend, how can you as a Christian, how can you as a Reverend support reproductive rights and support abortion? And it's not in spite of my faith. I'm not ignoring what my faith tradition says. It's because of my faith.
Exactly. My statement to them is threefold. Number one, since we believe in a God that is everywhere, knows everything, and is ever present for us, then God knows what we're going to do before we do it. So God's not surprised when I decide that I have enough children and I can't have another one. The second thing is the text clearly says, do not parent, do not bring into this world more children than you are able to take care of. You are worse than an infidel if you do that. That's New Testament text. Number three, it's important for us to understand that the Jeremiah text that's used is about baiting folk into guilt. It's in no way supporting or being used in the way that the text is written. It's important that people do what the text says, which is study for themselves and know that it is important for your relationship to be intimate and personal and not be guided by the ideas and edicts, dogma of a denomination or another person. We have to be able to engage in divine connection for ourselves. Women are the center of creation. Creation doesn't happen outside of us.
That's so true.
That's so true. And I know we've got some scripted questions here, Autumn, but I've got an unscripted question that I want to pose to Deneen and to Jen, because there is a deep, deep misconception about women's decision to have abortions. There is this mythology out there that women who find themselves pregnant, and it's almost, they don't talk about they focus on the women. They don't talk about the men who impregnated them. But this mythology that women are having abortions without giving it any thought, it's as simple as the simplest act and common act that we would do every day.
Well, what they do is they pose it to be like somebody going to a drive-in movie.
Yeah,
going to a drive-through, for fast food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right.
You decide, I want chicken, and you go order chicken.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
But I understand there's deep consultation with doctors and clergy when these women make these decisions. I mean, this is not just something that's made overnight. There's really a lot of thought. Sorry, Jen, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. And I appreciate this question because I do think it's a misconception and something that we need to talk about with delicacy, because we don't want to stigmatize people who make these decisions and know that it is the right decision for them. There are some people who make these decisions thoughtfully, but quickly. They get pregnant and they say, I know that I cannot be pregnant right now. And it is not an agonizing months-long decision for them. There are some people for whom that is a really difficult decision. There are some people who have abortions because they've had complexities and complications in their pregnancies that were highly desired. It spans the gamut. What I can do as taking care of people on a regular basis and providing abortion care on a regular basis, I have not met anybody ever who has said, oh, I haven't thought about this decision. I haven't considered this. Making these decisions within the context of their families, oftentimes in consultation with their partners, with their grandmas, with their moms, with their sisters. And they are not alone oftentimes in making these decisions. And they're also extremely thoughtful in terms of how they're communicating that to their community. Some people don't, and some people do because they need that support. I provided care a couple of days ago at clinic, and I did abortion care for a young mom, for a woman who was a grandmother. and had to get home to take care of her grandkids. I performed an abortion for someone who was graduating from a master's program, for a dentist, and for someone who was recovering from substance use disorder. There is no one stereotype or one type of person that has
Nope.
Everybody has abortions. Trans men have abortions, young women, older women, moms, single moms. And the other thing that I think is also really misunderstood is the role of men in this conversation. We've been talking a little bit about that. And men oftentimes are involved in these decisions. They are supportive of, and they are consulted, and they are a lot of times with my patients in clinic. They are holding their hands and they are right there with them. They are recognizing that this is a decision that is hers to make, but are completely supportive of it. And it's okay for men to have feelings about it too. I had a patient who she was very clear about how her health was going to be impacted in terms of the pregnancy, and was very clear about her decision to have abortion. He was very certain about supporting her, but he was having a hard time with the pregnancy ending because it was his first pregnancy that he had been involved in. And we worked with clergy. We prayed with him. We supported him. We didn't say, you don't get to have an opinion about this because you're a man. He was not telling her that she couldn't have an abortion or forcing her. He was being as supportive as possible. But these are community and family decisions oftentimes, and we need to treat them that way and recognize that it is not just this clandestine, secret decision that's being made, or that it's being done rapidly, or that people are doing it without thought. It's hard to get an abortion in this country. People aren't just doing it. They have to jump through a lot of hoops, and it is something that they're putting their body through. And so I don't want to make it sound like it's this overwhelmingly horrible negative decision, because for some people it's incredibly affirming and relieving. And we know that people who are able to get their needed abortions have better mental health than those who were denied needed abortions. But I think that erasing any stereotypes of who gets abortions is really important, and particularly affirming the role of, for a lot of people, their families and their partners and men in these decisions is also really important, so that we recognize that this just isn't a woman's problem. This is a community problem. This is a problem, meaning abortion restrictions as the problem affects families across the country.
Yeah, so well said. Thank you so much.
I think it's important to add to that even if we don't know that this person has had the procedure, some part of how we engage with them changes, and it doesn't just change for them. It changes, as she said, for everyone connected to them. And it's important that we not be cavalier as people who have the opportunity to vote for folk, as people who have the opportunity to provide care and support for people, that this is something that is just going to fly by and they're going to go on about their lives, and that's that. It can be any number of scenarios. Ultimately, that person will need support and to know that their decision was made in a way that honors them. And what's happening in our world right now, particularly in this country, is the decision is being taken from them. So there's no space for them to be honored and being able to make their choice.
And I know, Mitch, I'm going way off script, and I'm sorry. Just, the other piece in the way that Reverend Deneen is talking about support, and the way that I've been talking about support, I think circling back to the faith aspect of this, and I have so many patients who are doing this within the context of their faith, but are scared that they are going to be violating their faith in some way, because their organized religion or the people that they are looking out to for faith or spiritual support are not supportive of them. It's one of the reasons that I became, a board member for Catholics for Choice. The Catholic Church, the hierarchy has been one of the most outspoken against abortion, but we know that the majority of Catholics are pro-choice and support reproductive access, as we've heard from many faith traditions. And so it's incredibly important that we also talk about how abortion happens within the context of faith traditions and within the context of beliefs, because people who are having abortions need to hear that and know that their faith communities can and will support them through anything that they're going through, whether they're continuing a complicated pregnancy or having an abortion. And that's something that I think is also really missing, and that I'm hoping, even despite these bans, we'll be able to continue to uplift. And one of the reasons why I'm so thankful for this podcast.
Well, thank you. Those are great answers. Those are terrific. So, Deneen.
I was just going to add that we did a study with In Our Own Voice a few years back, looking at Black believers, specifically in Texas and in a few other states. And what we found is that 85% of folk who go to church more than 3 to 4 times a week want comprehensive reproductive health care, including abortion access. So that is absolutely true. And unfortunately, we're not hearing from the people in the pews. We're often hearing from the leaders who need this their ideology around abortion access to be known. But as she said, it's also true for most religions that are primarily Black, including some rigorous religions that have lots of church happenings on a weekly basis. Those women are also saying that they want to be able to have comprehensive reproductive health care for them and their daughters and their communities, including abortion access.
Right. So from a legal perspective, what Dr. Villavicencio and Reverend Deneen are saying is really significant, because what we're talking about is the freedom of people to make decisions about their lives, to be able to make moral decisions that are consistent with their conscience, and to be able to control their reproductive lives. And we believe that in a democracy, our Constitution protects that, the laws of our states protect that. And what we see is it's very troubling. But at the Supreme Court, when there was argument over the Mississippi law, you saw many faith groups weighing in against the Mississippi law, exactly what Dr. Villavicencio and Reverend Deneen are saying. They were weighing in against the law because of the harm that these types of laws do to people and communities, but also because of the real concern about religious freedom and about the ability of people to be able to make decisions about their own lives that are in accordance with their own conscience. So that's really what's at stake here. And it's a very concerning day in the country when we're seeing that these fundamental privacy interests are being threatened, and have been threatened, of course, for many years.
So we've talked a lot today about a lot of important facets to the potential of overturning Roe. So this question is for you all. If the Supreme Court returns the question of abortion to states, then what can be done by people of good faith, both legally, politically, and spiritually? I know that's more than both, but all of those. What can be done to combat this potential catastrophe from happening? Or how can we advocate and work for women's reproductive health to make advancements? Jen, let's start with you.
I appreciate that question, and I think it's a really heavy and tough one. I have a lot of people that are asking me, how can we make this not happen? How can we, prevent this from happening? And I think that the unfortunate situation is that we are going to see a significant increase in restrictions around abortion, whether or not it's outright banned, consistent with the leaked Supreme Court opinion, or it's less than. We're going to continue to see an assault on the ability of people to access essential healthcare. And so I think that there are a lot of different things that people of faith and that people who are supportive of their neighbors and their families and their friends accessing this care can do. I think talking about it, grappling with conflict around it, letting people know that it doesn't have to be a polarized conversation, that we can feel lots of different things all at the same time about really tough subjects. Sometimes abortion can be one of those things. We do that all the time with faith, with spirituality, with other things in our lives. And so talking to your family about it and helping people move forward with compassion and with empathy rather than judgment goes a long way. And I think that, one of the only ways, I'll let Skye talk about the legal aspects of this, but voting is going to be huge. Our lawmakers are the ones that are doing this. They are supposedly representing us. And so They are really working hard to make it hard for people to vote and to vote well. And so, one of the things that I have been really looking at and making sure that I'm working on with all of my organizations, Catholics for Choice, and all of the jobs that I'm working at, is making sure that we are working to make sure people can vote and have their voices heard. And so getting involved, particularly since it's a midterm election, getting out there and helping your community have their voice heard. And then at the end of the day, if none of those things are possible, being spiritually in spirit and in whatever way you can, supportive of people who are in need of non-judgmental, compassionate care, whether they're having a miscarriage, an abortion, a pregnancy, or in a complicated social situation, we can just extend ourselves with empathy. I think that that is going to help us move towards a place where we as Americans can understand that this is not a polarized issue. It should not be, and ultimately should be a decision that's being made by people who have expertise in their own lives.
Well, thank you so much. And Deneen.
Yes. For me, it's a twofold thing. It's important that we actively engage on purpose with educating folk in congregations, particularly in areas that have trigger bans in place, so that they can mobilize to get folks to care, whether that's paying for a bus ticket, paying for a plane fare, or just driving them themselves. Also, it's important for folks to get connected to funds in their area, abortion funds, so that they can volunteer. They can also be support via telephone, taking folks' meals, helping with their small children. Should a person have a procedure, those are all ways that people can help that will help us during this time, because in places where people have trigger bans, they're going to have to travel. And so traveling with small children is very difficult, very costly, and makes the process almost something that you're like, you know what, it'll be easier for me to just have the kid than to have to go through all of this to get to some place, even though you're already struggling, as for instance, or you're someone that knows you don't want a parent at this time. Being able to get quickly to a fund and get the support that you need is so important. And those are ways that good people of good faith can be helpful now.
I love that. Thank you so much. And Skye, we know that you're in an airport and connection is a little shaky, but we're going to give you the last word. We're also going to let these answers serve as our more to tell question. At Good Faith Media, our tagline is "There's more to tell." And both of you have just answered that question beautifully. So Skye, we're going to give you the last word. What is your more to tell? And give us some hope. What can we do to make certain that women's health, reproductive health, is protected and not only in the future, but that it can thrive in the future?
Well, I think that, look, how we have hope is conversations like this, being in community with each other, having these conversations, being able to meet people where they are, understand folks' perspective, and talk honestly about what is going on in our communities, how these laws and restrictions are harmful to people, and how we can be in community and help people. I also want to give you some hope about the courts. And it's hard to have hope about the courts right now, but I will tell you that lawyers and advocates are not going to give up on what we know is fundamentally right in our Constitution and in our democracy, which is that people get to control and make decisions about what's right for them in their lives. Those are fundamental privacy interests. They're fundamental equality interests, making sure that women and people have equality under the law, that restrictions not be enacted that only affect one group of people over another, such as women. Lawyers are not going to give up this fight. You see that recently. There's been a lot of coverage about this, and you'll see it. So I hope that that gives hope that we all have to do what we can do in our corners. It is going to be a long road, but we can travel it together, and we can do that while making sure that we're affirming the radical equality of all people, both under the law and, of course, in our world more broadly.
Dr. Villavicencio, Reverend Robinson, Skye Perryman, thank you so much for lending your voice to this important podcast, this important issue. It does seem like it's dark days, but you have given us hope that we can continue to take a stand, to step up, stand up, speak out, step out, and march forward. So thank you all for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to
Thank
our
you.
Good Faith audience, we appreciate you tuning in this week. Autumn and I will be back next week with another guest. And until then, keep living good faith.